Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today's episode is going to be the last one in this series that we have been doing for some time now about how Carl Jung interpreted alchemy psychologically. And in today's episode, we are going to look at one of the most interesting figures in alchemy and Jungian psychology alike, the trickster or the shadow. If you are new here, please take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And without further ado, let's begin. So like in every other episode in this series, we will start with a quote from Carl Jung himself. And this one goes as follows. The process of the development of the libido culminates in the conscious attitude, which we call the tricksy attitude. What exactly does it entail? In Jungian psychology, the tricksy attitude is the attitude of self-realization. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend you do, because it is in that video that we explain some of the basics of Jungian psychology. Now, the way that we separate out these different elements of our personality is through the process of confronting our shadow. The shadow is the unconscious part of our personality, and in order to bring it into consciousness, we must first separate it out from the rest of our personality. However, in order to reach this stage, we must first go through the process of confronting our shadow. Jung believed that everyone has a unique potential that they are meant to fulfill. We must then integrate our shadow into our personality. And this is where the tricksy attitude comes in. It is not a static state. Rather, it is a dynamic state, as Jung said. It is the outcome of a long process of education. It is not something that we achieve once and then that's it. And we do that by becoming aware of our unconscious processes. We must then integrate our shadow into our personality. And this is where the tricksy attitude comes in. The philosopher's stone was not just a physical object. It was also a symbol of the ultimate goal of alchemy. In Jungian psychology, the tricksy attitude is represented by the self. The self is not just a part of our personality. It is also a symbol of our ultimate goal in life, to achieve self-realization. The tricksy attitude is the attitude of self-realization. It is the attitude in which we are comfortable with who we are and what we are. We are no longer afraid of our shadow. We have integrated it into our personality, and we are able to use it in a healthy way. Rather, it is something that we must constantly work towards. We must constantly strive to become better individuals. And that means constantly confronting our shadow and integrating it into our personality. The ultimate goal of the process of individuation is the development of the tricksy attitude, which is the result of the conscious acceptance of one's shadow. This attitude is not merely subjective. It is the outcome of a long process of psychological education. It is the final result of a long evolution which turns gradually from object to subject. When we have successfully integrated our shadow, we have reached the tricksy attitude. This is the attitude of self-realization. It is the attitude in which we are comfortable with who we are and what we are. However, in order to do that, we must first become individuals. We must become who we are meant to be. This is the goal of individuation. Individuation is the process of working towards this goal. And the way that we do that is through the process of individuation. We have integrated it into our personality, and we are able to use it in a healthy way. So the tricksy attitude is not something that we achieve once and then we're done. Rather, it is something that we must constantly work towards. And then once we have done that, we must integrate it back into our personality in a healthy way. In that video, we explained how the prima materia was chaos, how the alchemist had to go through a process of separating out all the different elements of the prima materia in order to purify it. This was the final stage of the alchemical process. And in this stage, the alchemist would combine all the different elements together to create something new. Jung took this and applied it to psychology as well. He said that in the final stage of psychological development, we must combine all the different elements of our personality together to create something new. And this new thing is the tricksy attitude. And then when they were ready, they would combine these elements together again to create something new, something more valuable. Jung took this and applied it to the psyche. He said that our psyche is also like this prima materia, and that in order to develop psychologically, we must go through a process of separating out all the different elements of our personality. It is the attitude in which we become aware of both our conscious and unconscious sides, and integrate them into a harmonious whole. The tricksy attitude is the goal of the process of individuation, which is the central process in Jungian psychology. It was during this stage that the alchemists would add different ingredients to the mixture in order to cause it to decay. This process of decay was necessary in order to break down the old and create something new. Jung took this and applied it to psychology as well. He said that in order to break down our old ways of thinking and behaving and create new ones, we must go through a process of psychological decay. And this process of psychological decay is what Jung meant by the confrontation of the shadow. So the tricksy attitude is really the ultimate goal of psychological development, according to Jung. This is the final result of a long evolution which turns gradually from object to subject. It is the outcome of a long process of education. It is nothing merely subjective. In other words, the tricksy attitude is not simply something that we invent out of thin air, but rather it is the result of a long process of psychological development. It is only through a long process of confronting and integrating our shadow that we can come to have this kind of consciousness. So the question that we need to ask ourselves in order to understand this concept is, what does the tricksy attitude actually mean? Now, if you remember from our previous videos, Jung took over the alchemical process and projected it onto the process of psychological development. In alchemy, the magnum opus was the work that the alchemists did in order to transform base metals into gold. Jung took this and said that our psychological development is also a process of working towards a goal. In alchemy, the goal was gold. In psychology, the goal is the tricksy attitude. In our previous video, we looked at how Jung interpreted the prima materia. And when we are ready, we must combine these elements back together again to create something new, something more valuable. In alchemy, this process of separating out and combining together different elements was called the putrefaction. Now, the tricksy attitude is the final stage of this process. It is the stage in which we have successfully integrated our shadow and achieved self-realization. So what exactly is individuation? Individuation is the process of becoming an individual. It is the process of realizing one's unique potential. In order to individuate, we must first confront our shadow. And we do that by becoming aware of our unconscious processes. Now, the tricksy attitude is not something that we remain in forever. In alchemy, the process of separating out and combining together different elements was called the coagulation. This is the attitude in which we are comfortable with who we are and what we are. We are no longer afraid of our shadow. In order to achieve the tricksy attitude, we must first confront our shadow. In alchemy, the tricksy attitude was represented by the philosopher's stone. To conclude, let me quote Carl Jung once again. I hope that you found this video helpful. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.